Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to welcome entrepreneur, consultant, and author of multiple books, Why on Earth, Get Smarter, Feel Better, Heal the Planet, and his latest book, Viriditas, The Great Healing is Within Our Power, Aaron Perry. So, welcome, Aaron.
Hi, Karen. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
So, Aaron, firstly, I'd like to congratulate you on all your achievements. So, can you share with us how your entrepreneurial journey started?
Well, funny enough, it's been a journey. It really has, with a lot of different phases and chapters. And in a way, it kind of started in my childhood. My parents, my father in particular, have the entrepreneurial bug, and I sometimes joke that it can be a hereditary disease. And so, they had a company early on that when I was in middle school and mowing lawns to make a little scratch, my father said, "Hey, would you come help us with our accounting and bookkeeping?" And I said, "Well, how much would you pay, right?" And he said, whatever he said, it was more than I could make mowing lawns. And I said, "Sure, I'll give it a try."
Yeah.
And it turned out it was interesting and easy. And then when I was in college and I became a dad at a really young age, I of course needed to balance being a student and earning money to support the family. And
Yes.
so at that point, did more and more accounting and bookkeeping work for a variety of companies and entrepreneurs, for profits, nonprofits, all kinds of different organizations. And that really gave me an insight into both what kinds of opportunities are out there, and also what kinds of pitfalls and challenges are out there.
Yes, absolutely. So you've worked with high impact entrepreneurs and are highly successful. Your emphasis has been on sustainability and the preservation of our humanity and Earth, which is dedicated to management teams, triple bottom line companies, indigenous leaders, faith communities, educational institutions, and other innovative organizations with a similar focus. So, can you share with us more about this? And what inspired you to pursue a career in such a highly complex space?
Yeah, I guess in a sense I'm attracted to complexity. I think
Yes,
that might in part be related to the great fortune I had of attending a Jesuit high school, where, instead of getting a simplified, watered down, or even dumbed down version of anything we were studying, we
yes,
tended to get a very nuanced view of things, whether it's history or theology or philosophy or whatever. And I think it helped open me and my classmates up to an understanding that, wow, much of this reality we're sharing together has quite a bit of nuance, quite a bit of complexity. And so, yeah, I guess I've been attracted to that. I've also been very committed to this sense of being in service and doing
yes,
what I can as an individual, as a community member, to help make our world a better place. And I think, sort of by definition, especially right now in these times that we're living in, that might sort of necessarily bring us in the direction of some complexity. And clearly, when we're entrepreneurial, when we're innovating, when we're presenting new opportunities, new products, new services to the marketplace, to the community, that necessarily brings with it some complexity. And yeah, it can at times, as you know, Karen, be daunting and tiring, but of
yes,
course, a lot of the time it's exhilarating and so rewarding, especially collaborating with so many other dedicated individuals and teams who are also motivated by making our world a better place.
yes, absolutely. So, what would you say some of your biggest lessons within your career have been? And you probably had multiple, like all of us, but what would you say stands out most for you?
Yeah, yeah, there have been many. Um, look, like,
Being an
I've got,
entrepreneur, that's
yeah,
the way, that's what you sign up for.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I've made a lot of mistakes. And my adult daughter, Osha, who's now 24, and she's actually in medical school and studied neuroscience in undergraduate school. She and I joke that we grew up together. And,
Mm.
in many ways, I would say that's actually accurate, not only in
Yes.
terms of, the kind of quote unquote normal growing up we do as young adults, but also professionally. And one of the things I've observed, and I've had the good fortune also of connecting with a number of tremendous mentors, generally elders who have been through a lot more experientially than I have. And
Yes.
I think what we find when we connect to these mentors is that they too have had a number of quote unquote failures. They too have been through really challenging times when things didn't go the way they had hoped or envisioned or planned. And
Mm.
I think one of the things we learn is that that's okay. That's part of the human journey. That's certainly part of the entrepreneurial journey.
Yes.
And now that I'm sort of in the middle chapter of my professional career, it's lovely because I continue to learn from mentors and also increasingly get to mentor other, often younger entrepreneurs and organizational leaders. So, in terms of lessons learned, yeah, there have been many. So, one, my business partners and I several years ago launched a food hub, a regional organic natural food distribution system connecting hundreds of farmers and value added artisan food manufacturers to restaurants, to retail grocery stores, even to sports stadiums, and working bringing products into places like Whole Foods. And
Yes.
that food world has such razor thin margins, and you're literally competing against some of the biggest multi-billion-dollar companies out
Goodness,
there.
yeah.
It is a brutal, brutal environment, and oddly, I mean, this is the industry, quote unquote, industry from which our food, our nourishment of our mind, body, and spirit is coming. So it's fraught, and we were swinging for the fences. We were really looking to scale up to a point where we'd have meaningful impact in the food system here in Colorado and the Rocky Mountain West in the United States. And while we were crossing through that valley of death, which is a term many entrepreneurs are familiar with as you're scaling to a point of profitability and positive cash flow, we ran into a very challenging situation with a private equity group. And the board and I were faced with a decision that ultimately led to the shutting down of the company,
Oh,
which
that's
of
so
course had
unfortunate.
a lot of tough impact on people and on other
Yeah.
companies. But it was a decision that had to be made and wasn't made lightly. And so from that, and I love writing, Karen, as you know, and I consider maybe
Yes.
at some point I'll write something like a book, maybe a shorter book called Food Hub Fail, or Food
Yes.
Fail, where I can share some of those learnings, but also, give some more insight into the food system, which here in the U.S. is really broken for a variety of reasons.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's part of it. And not getting out over our skis. That's one of the expressions we use out here in the mountain country where a lot of us are skiing, where we have to, as we're scaling, as we're moving through opportunities, keeping our costs and our revenue in check is one of the perennial challenges of any
Oh,
business leader
yeah. I
and
mean, I
any
know that
skill,
even.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that's part of it too. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, one of the big lessons I learned also is to make sure that I'm working with the people where there's really good resonance and rapport, whatever we're doing. At the end of the day, we're spending a lot of time together, collaborating, troubleshooting, working through sometimes stressful times. And I think that interpersonal environment or landscape or ecosystem is a really important one to pay attention to. And look, I've learned lessons also in that arena in terms of becoming, hopefully, a better, gentler leader, especially when there's stress in the system. That's when sometimes our patterns and behaviors that show up might not be as
Yes.
as effective, right, as they otherwise could be.
Absolutely. So that actually leads me to the next question. Obviously, want to, and you just briefly touched on it now, is talk about leadership or the lack of leadership from both an entrepreneurial and global perspective. So, what do you think makes your leadership style different? And what do you believe needs to change the current narrative from both a global and entrepreneurial leadership standpoint? And can you give us any examples that have impacted your own team or those that you've consulted with?
Wow. Oh, wow. That's a great
Sorry, I
question
know it's a lot.
and a big one. Yeah. Well, I think that it's probably clear to a lot of us, Karen, and I imagine to your audience, it's pretty clear that leadership's really important.
Yes,
And it's especially important, it seems, in challenging times and difficult times, in times with complexity. And
yes.
I'm mindful right now. I'm thinking of my dear friend and mentor, Dr. Jandel Allen Davis, who's actually been on the Y on Earth Community podcast as a guest 2 times.
Oh,
And
amazing.
yeah, she's not only an executive leader, she's also a medical doctor and is currently the CEO of one of the premier brain trauma and spinal injury hospitals in the United States, which happens to be in Denver. And I remember talking with Jandel, and she brought up this term, this acronym VUCA, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity.
Mm,
And I think she told me that the term kind of arose in the military and intelligence communities during the Cold War and into this last several decades, where global terrorism has been such a serious threat to so many of us. And anyway, with VUCA, there's this recognition from leaders in particular that yes, we make plans and yes, we prepare for a variety of scenarios, but at the end of the day, we can't necessarily predict with certainty how things are actually going to play out.
no.
And so the response to VUCA is this thing called VUCA Prime. And that stands for, let's see if I can remember this off the top of my head. That stands for vision, understanding. Uh, let's see. Forgetting the other two, I apologize. Vision, understanding. It might come back to me later in the discussion. Um, Awareness and agility might be the A. I think it's agility. Anyway, that ability to maintain a bigger vision while also being able to adapt and respond to changing circumstances is really important. And
Yeah.
so the leaders that I admire and that I look up to in a big way, regardless of what domain they happen to be in, they might be politicians, they might be business leaders, they might be authors, they might be thought leaders.
Mm,
What I observe is there's this ability to recognize when things are challenging,
yeah.
to maintain some compassionate connection, and to also maintain vision and to be able to articulate a pathway forward,
Mm.
regardless of what challenges or obstacles might appear to lie in the way. So, that's a bit on leadership, and boy, this is a topic that we could spend hours on,
I was
Karen.
on.
And I'm almost forgetting some of the other specifics you had asked in your question. So maybe if there's something you want to ask
Yeah,
further,
so I think
remind me.
also just some examples of your own leadership style that's worked or that makes you different from other experiences maybe that you've encountered or been through yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And then what do
okay.
you think needs to change the narrative from a global and entrepreneurial perspective?
Okay, this is beautiful. Thank you for that kind of re-prompting because it actually brings something up that I'm really excited to talk about, right? And it is a change in my own style that I think is the result of lessons learned.
Yes.
And basically, what I would say for shorthand is it's a transition from a yang style, which I'll explain in a minute, to a more yin style.
Okay.
And many of us, when we're setting out, we've got an idea, we're launching a company, it's go, go, go. Maybe we're raising some outside capital, right? And
Yes.
have that additional responsibility and stress to those stakeholders, returning capital and yield to those stakeholders. And very often, what that creates is this stress-laden environment. in which we're running, pushing.
Yeah.
And the challenge there is that it turns out the process is not a sprint. It's actually going to be a very long journey, especially if
Yeah.
it's a slow one. And so there's a high likelihood of burnout, if not before burnout, of fatigue and exhaustion and a sort of stress level decision making that can really interfere with the deeper wisdom coming through. And so I think, one of the things I've learned these last several years is to become more uh, still and to do
Yes.
more listening. And for me,
Yeah.
that means more time literally in nature. And I
Mm.
was just the other day getting, I call it a download. I was getting a bit of an insight around my personal job description with my role in an ecosystem of several different organizations. And part of my job description literally is to be in nature regularly every week for
Yeah. It's so important to keep
yeah.
rooted. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know you do this as well, Karen, because I see your social media posts and you're out there a lot with the forest and with the water. And I think it's for those of us who are aspiring to have very real impact and or who are already in positions of very real responsibility and authority, I think that connection with nature and that quieting down, that slowing down so we can listen instead
Mm.
of projecting out thoughts and plans and to-do lists so that we can
Yeah.
hear, what really wants to emerge. And I have found that when we do that slowing down and when we move more into a quiet yin space, of course, this is a reference to yin and yang, uh,
Yes, of course.
the ancient Chinese symbol that signifies balance between polarities, whether that's male, female, or day and night. And funny enough, as is explained in my book Viriditas, that symbol, that pattern was actually derived watching the movements, the shadows of the moon over time.
Mm.
So, that's kind of a fun little connection there to what's in the book. But being in that quieter place, I think it allows better strategy and decision making to
Mm.
emerge, Karen, where often, especially these days, with our very rapid communications technologies, our very short PR news cycles and so on, it's so easy for us to get this kind of like overwhelming ongoing pile of to-dos in our to-do
Mm.
list. And I think when we take that quiet time and listen, what happens is the list of all this noise kind of fades and the really important priorities emerge. And it helps us
Yeah.
probably manage our time and our uh, step taking and even strategic approach to our work in a more intelligent way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that there's a lot to be learned from nature too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, yeah, we could dive right into that, right? Because that's kind of what the Veritas book is all about in a very literal way.
yes. So you are highly educated and have multiple degrees. So do you believe that this has given you an advantage within your own career? And if so, can you give us any examples?
Yeah, that's a hilarious one, right? Because I've had a
Because there's
very
always two different views on this.
yeah, I've had a very what we might call unconventional path. Um,
Yes.
in part because I think I'm a very curious and creative person
Mm.
and tend not to want to be in any particular box. I like to color outside the lines, as it were. So
Yeah.
yes, I've studied a lot of different things, a lot of different subjects,
Mm.
ranging from philosophy and literature and history, writing, of course, to environmental policy and sustainable economic development.
Mm.
And of course, have also studied outside of academia things like permaculture, uh, ecosystem restoration, regenerative agriculture, and other disciplines that connect in with those arenas. And so, on the one hand, one might say it's been a more challenging path for perhaps some of the kind of conventional or mainstream marks of success. On
Mm,
the other hand, I think that especially having an awareness of history and to a certain degree philosophy and certainly literature, that which is
mm.
a way of exploring human experiences across time, space, and culture. Uh,
Yes.
I think that does give us perspective that is helpful in our journeys through life generally and in our journeys as entrepreneurs specifically. I don't know that there's one single path. I don't know that there's one magic bullet. I know when I talk to different very successful entrepreneurs, who are now investing in a bunch of companies themselves and helping other entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
the thing I'm observing is that there's no single pathway to get into that arena of entrepreneurship and organizational development.
Mm,
And so, yeah, it's I wouldn't trade anything. I can tell you that, Karen. Um,
yes.
but would it have been helpful at times to say have an MBA from a prestigious university? Yeah, that probably would have been helpful at times.
Yeah.
Um, However, again, I think especially those of us called to be eco scene entrepreneurs, which is this new term I'm thinking about and chewing on as we're writing articles and putting out other white papers and so on. Eco scene meaning this time when we humans become aware enough that we transform our societies and our economies into stewardship and regeneration oriented ecosystems. And so, as we're moving in the direction of eco scene entrepreneurship, I think it actually is a huge benefit to have a very diversified background, education, perspective, because we are by definition dealing with very complex issues across technology, history, culture, human psychology, and of course,
Food.
economic food. Yeah,
Yeah.
some of the fundamentals like soil, right, and water.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it, but it's not always been easy. It's like the road less traveled, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're deeply passionate about Earth and humanity, and you have a great depth and insight, especially currently, as it's a very critical time for humanity on all frontiers. So, can you share with us where your passion came from and how this influenced you in the work that you do now?
Yeah, and it is an authentic passion that I have carried inside for a long time. Really, some of this
Yes.
goes back to some unusual early childhood experiences I had in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. And then in high school, again at Regis Jesuit High School, which is in Denver, Colorado, had some extraordinary teachers who
Yes.
not only were teaching us the standard academic subjects, but were also inculcating a deep emphasis on service to
Yes.
humanity, and connecting the dots between service to humanity, things like environmental justice and environmental stewardship. And so I was not only with these amazing teachers, but also with an incredible class, an incredible group of peers, some of
Yeah.
whom remain my best friends to this day.
Amazing.
And, we had a high school Amnesty International chapter. We created, with the guidance of one of our teachers, the first environmental club at our school. We did a lot of different work around the campus to improve both the environmental and the social cultural sustainability of the campus. And our Amnesty International chapter at high school, actually, it turns out, was the largest in terms of student membership. It was the largest in the whole country. And that meant that we got invited, the leadership, the elected officers, we got invited to a handful of actual conferences where people from all around the world, many of whom were political refugees dealing with terrible human rights abuses,
Yeah.
were sharing their stories, right? So, as relatively young men, it was an all boys school. We were exposed firsthand and had our eyes opened to some of the reality of what's going on, what was going on, what is going on in the world, and it's quite a bit different reality in many cases than than we would find in a place like suburban Denver, right? Where my
Yeah.
friends and peers and I lived and grew up. And so, yeah, I have to give big shout outs to many of the Jesuits who are now several professors at different universities who helped us, teaching
Amazing.
us not only the academic subjects, but really a sense of ethics for working responsibly in our world.
Amazing. So with that, what would you say some of your biggest highlights have been? And I'm sure you've had multiple highlights, but what would you say has been some of your biggest?
Oh my gosh. Well, okay, look, I have to say what comes right to mind is collaborating with my children. And I mentioned my daughter Osha. She's so
Yes.
bright. And I interviewed her on the Y on Earth community podcast about health and wellness from a medical and neurological perspective. And
Amazing.
my son Hunter is also bright and has, I say, the heart of a lion, and he's extraordinarily creative. He's an architecture and design student, and he actually, along with our pal Jake Welsh, the graphic designer I've been working with for a long, long time, Hunter basically designed the cover of Veritas. And so
Amazing.
it
That's
was
a
such a
wonderful, that's wonderful.
yeah, yeah. It was such a joy collaborating with him over many, many months. So we did a lot of changing and tweaking and adjusting and
Yeah.
so that comes to mind for sure. And just as I had opportunities to work with my parents' company when I was younger, my kids as well have had those kinds of opportunities over these last several years, which I think gives them some insight. And funny enough, I think my daughter decided not to go in an entrepreneurial direction, at least at this stage in her career. Although I won't be surprised if she gets there
If she
eventually.
does.
And my son, he's got it. You know, he's already enterprising in a variety of ways. Um, but yeah, that's been tremendous. And of course, collaborating with many other organizational leaders. I'm thinking of a dear friend of mine, Artem Nikolkov, who's on the board of directors for the Y on Earth community, the nonprofit that we run. And he is the founder and CEO of a media and marketing company called Earth Coast Productions. And they do tremendous work. And it's such a joy collaborating with him and his team. And yeah, like when we're launching books, sometimes, things can get a little dicey, a little stressful. Some, technology plugins not working in our tech stack, delaying, the publishing of certain media or whatever. That stuff happens.
Yes.
And to be able to work through those stressful moments in a way that maintains a lot of joy and love and compassion and respect and kindness is invaluable. And so huge shout out to Artem and of course Katie Ross Garces and Brad Lidge on our board as well. And many in our ambassador network at the Y on Earth community are so wonderful to collaborate with. John Parcell now helping with our development work. And so it's I think that the wins for me anyway really make me think of the people that I enjoy working with and admire and respect. And I'm thinking of some of the people back with my previous businesses, Al Stemp, Martin Newton, Kirsten Suddeth, Luke Eisenhower. I mean, we went through a lot of different challenges, including the 2008, 2009 economic meltdown,
Yeah.
and made some challenging decisions together that I think resulted in a number of wins or victories or successes. And that all said, Karen, I think that I'm a pretty driven individual and very much each day wake up with this feeling of joy and calm, but also of, hey, there's a lot to do. And
Yes.
I think we're living in this time when clearly there is a lot to do. There's a
Oh,
lot.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
And it's
yeah,
almost to the point where it's overwhelming.
it can be. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
mean, look, I maybe you experience this too as a podcaster. For me, getting to interview a variety of people, I think gives me more of a sense of calm and hope because I understand directly that so many people now are engaged in this very important work. And so
Mhm.
no single one of us is responsible for the entire situation, and nor should
Yeah.
we. And almost by definition, when we have an ecological understanding of systems, complex
Yes.
systems, you
Yeah.
don't want a single node, a single person,
No.
a single entity to have too much responsibility. And so this notion of decentralized and emergent leadership and transformational organizations and community development and community dynamics, that's I think the robust and fertile ground for us to create this new world and this beautiful future together.
Absolutely. So you're also the author of multiple books, the first book being The Why on Earth, and then Get Smarter, Feel Better, Heal the Planet. As your passion runs deep, especially in sustainability, which cross-pollinates into all aspects of your work, can you share with us how and where your passion came from and how this influenced your writing? And was becoming an author an organic process for you, or did you find it challenging? Because some
Okay,
people
cool.
find
Yeah,
writing very challenging.
yeah, yeah. I would say it's both organic and can be challenging at times, but I love
Yes.
writing. I love writing. So I identified as a writer actually very early on. Even in high school, I was already writing poetry and other things, essays, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I've had this inner knowing for quite a long time that I would write and have written
Yes.
a lot over the years. In my 20s, I had a novel I was working on back then, but I quit drinking a few years ago, Karen. But back then, what would happen is I would get into sort of the creative musing of the process and have a couple glasses of wine, and then sort of lose the focus and discipline one needs to actually complete something
Yes.
like a novel.
And
Which
have a
does,
clear mind.
yeah, clear mind. It takes a lot of discipline, at least in my
Yeah.
experience, that's the case.
Mm.
And the insights that emerged with we had a recycling and renewable energy business, and I mentioned the food distribution business. The insights that emerged there, in our experience, helped me to understand that, especially when it comes to food and health and well-being, which
Mm.
is intimately connected with global sustainability.
Yeah.
Most of us, at least in this culture in the United States, were severely undereducated and unaware. And so,
100%.
yeah, with Why
Well,
on Earth.
even in medicine, it's the same. They don't even teach doctors. It's like a 3-hour nutritional class in the whole
Yeah,
series of years that they study. So
yeah,
it's not
yeah.
good.
Let thy food be thy medicine. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so with Why on Earth, that book, which is nonfiction, with the subtitle "Get Smarter, Feel Better, Heal the Planet," really speaking to those first two calls to action: get smarter and feel better. Literally, we have so many simple strategies that each one of us can incorporate into our lives right now, today, tomorrow, the day after that. Many of them are going to save money and not cost money, that will improve our neurobiological well-being, improve our serotonin production, improve, even there's science and studies indicating with many of these strategies, improving our cognitive performance and creativity, right? Who doesn't want
Yeah.
that? And
Yeah.
and helping us literally physically feel better in our bodies. And
Mm.
so it turns out that many of those strategies, when we really start to understand the connections between water, practices of well-being, soil, food, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
many of those strategies line up directly with the global strategies that many of us are now working to scale up around the planet for stewardship, regeneration, and sustainability, right? And this
Yes.
includes detoxification.
Oh,
This
100%.
includes connecting with the living soil. These things that our ancestors, by definition, did, living in closer relationship with nature.
Yeah.
And, I'm so excited because, Karen, I guess you can sense the passion I do have about all of this, the enthusiasm
100%.
I have. And really, there's so much more millions of us can be choosing for ourselves right now if we want to.
Mm. And also, I think, as difficult as the pandemic was, that what I do think it has done is it's raised our level of consciousness, or certainly a lot of people, and then you kind of feel like when your level is raised, you kind of connect with the same type of people that have this, similar relationship to it. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think one of the unexpected blessings of the pandemic is that it required a lot of us to slow down a bit.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us had a little bit more of that time and space to listen and to reflect. And maybe it was a little uncomfortable at times, but I know many of my writer friends were very productive.
Yes.
Um, it was it was a time, interestingly, that we all went through at a planetary scale, and
Mm,
so I find it to be a very hopeful experience that might help point the way now for some of the things we can be doing together in our own lives, in our own neighborhoods and communities, in our world. And in Veriditas, in the story, there's a big slowing down that happens for the main character, for Brigitte Sophia, this super smart entrepreneur and computer scientist, right? And she's
yeah.
very East Coast in New York City, meeting with financiers, right? Getting it done.
Yeah.
And because all of a sudden there's this enormous change of circumstances for her, she basically has to get out to the Rocky Mountain West and slow down and spend time in nature, even though maybe she doesn't want to.
Yeah.
And something
It's funny
magical
how
happens,
resistance
right?
kicks in.
Yeah, something
Yeah.
something happens. Something starts changing within her, and so yeah, I hope your audience will get a copy of Veriditas and enjoy it. And I'll just mention veriditasbook.com is a place where folks can go to get the book, learn about the book, see some of our early press and media about the book, and also a number of fun short videos we've developed with Artem's team at Earth Coast Productions that we'll be sharing through social media and other outlets over the coming weeks. So that's Veriditas, Veriditas book .com. And I guess while I'm on it, I'll mention whyonearth.org. It's the letter Y, YONEARTH.org. That's our nonprofit where all these other
Yeah.
books can be found, our Soil Stewardship Handbook, and podcast episodes and other resources for folks, especially for folks who want to take on many of these personal lifestyle strategies we can incorporate right now and share with our neighbors in our community. There's a lot there at the site for all of that.
Amazing. So obviously you've touched on the book. Veriditas is the greatest healing within our power. So it's an incredibly exciting and very powerful story and very relevant in these transformational and challenging times. So can you share with the audience more about this amazing book and what do you hope people will take away from the book? And what are the key lessons and messages from the book,
Yeah.
if you don't mind?
Okay.
Just
Great. Yeah.
elaborating.
Yeah. It's one of these things I love sharing about what's in this book because there are
Yes.
so many threads,
Yeah.
technology, sustainable economics, culture,
Mm.
indigenous wisdom, ancient knowledge, esoteric knowledge, sacred geometry, right? All these different subjects and topics are woven together in an epic journey that Brigitte Sophia undertakes through the course of the story.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's a little challenging because I don't want to give it all away, right? So
Yeah.
she, as I mentioned, is this really smart computer scientist and entrepreneur, and basically she has cracked the code to deep artificial intelligence. And it's why at the beginning of the story she's chased literally right through Central Park, goes by Cleopatra's Needle, the ancient Egyptian obelisk some folks might be familiar with, and that's where we start sprinkling in some of the references to esoterica and symbols. And there's
Yes.
some like Dan Brown Da Vinci Code energy in this for folks who like those kinds of stories. And there's a lot of cipher coded messages throughout the book in the margins and so on that for folks who like that can decipher those. And so she has to flee, right? And she flees out to Colorado. And
Yeah.
here in Colorado, here in Boulder, Colorado, she meets up with this enigmatic guy, a friend of a friend, who helps her out.
Yes.
And of course, she does not like him at first. She
Mm.
feels so vulnerable. She has to ditch her technology. She has to go off grid. She is being chased by these very scary paramilitary men and doesn't know when they're going to show up again. And so, yeah, she does not like this guy Leo at first, but
Mm.
you know how love stories go. Uh,
Yes.
so there may or may not be a romance in all of this, but through this adventure, she ends up with Leo visiting a number of special wilderness locations and
Mm.
regenerative farms, biodynamic farms, permaculture farms out here in Colorado, and gets exposed, immersed in these alternative realities that are very real, right? Some of my friends say, "Oh, this sounds like science fiction." And I say, "Well,
Mm.
it's science reality." And
Yes.
in this story, she gets exposed to so much that really helps her understand the steps that she needs to take and decides to take with her tremendously dangerous and precarious situation that she's in. And so all of that, Karen, is the setup, right? All of that is
Yes.
the story that leads us into the major crescendo and revelation. And in that, without giving too much away, there is a tremendously important communication for humanity in these times that we're all sharing together
Yes.
about our culture on our planet right now and what
Yeah.
can be done. And so I'm so excited for lots of folks all over the place to read the story and have that experience. And many dozens of our friends and colleagues have already read the book now at this point, and the feedback is really positive. That although it's a pretty long book, it's a page turner, and folks are really feeling a personal impact and transformation
Connection. Yeah.
from the story.
Yeah, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So that leads me to the two final questions. What are the three key pieces of advice you would give to other entrepreneurs looking to pursue a similar career or just to start their own business? And what legacy would you like to leave, or how would you like to be remembered? Because some people don't like the word legacy. So, how would you like to
Okay.
be remembered?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, those are really cool questions. I like both of them a lot. And the first one, advice to entrepreneurs. We recently put together a little article for, I think it was not OpsLens, it was, what is it, Expert Hub or
The
something like.
Expert Hub, yeah.
Yeah, Expert Hub, where basically I'm speaking to this question. And from my perspective, first of all, if you have the bug, if you are an entrepreneur, if you're aspiring to be an entrepreneur, you might consider a few questions before starting. One, what would you do if you had $1 billion right now? You just
Hmm.
have it drops in your lap. What would you do?
Wow.
And is that different from what you would do with your entrepreneurial idea? Because if
Yeah.
it's different, you might want to reflect a little further.
Yeah.
And then secondly, I think it's really important to eyes open, assess your own strengths and weaknesses,
Mm.
and create a team around you so that you have a number of the key uh, knowledge areas, knowledge domains, experiential domains required for the successful launch and scaling up of a company. And I would also recommend that at least one of those people is a much more experienced, which by definition means older, individual. So that what I see with my friends and mentors that have been around the block several times is they've seen a lot and learned a lot, and you can as an entrepreneur really benefit from that amazing perspective. And and then yeah, is the motivation behind your entrepreneurial idea simply because you want to make a lot more money and have some level of success, or is it a deeper motivation of creating something that is good for humanity and good for the planet? Is there a
Yeah.
service element at the foundation of this impulse? And if there is, beautiful. And if there
Mm.
isn't, you might consider and reflect. And I would say this not only because I believe the world needs more service-oriented entrepreneurs, but also because I think in terms of competitive advantage, we're actually now rapidly moving in a direction where the general public, the consumers, are increasingly selecting products and services that are coming from companies who have at their heart this social and environmental service. And so if
100%.
you don't have that, you're actually probably not going to compete very well in the coming
No.
years and decades. And that's probably the reality, and it's a good one. So
Yes.
those are a few of the questions that I would ask Karen. And yeah, if folks want to check out that article, that's on our veritasbook.com website under the in the news section. And yeah, I'm forgetting what
And
the other.
then, how would you like to be remembered?
Oh, like legacy.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? In our Native American traditions, and I think probably indigenous traditions all around the planet, there's this notion of making decisions for the next 7 generations. And
Mm,
I remember hearing this early on in life and wondering, and I'm part Mohawk through my father's line. And I remember wondering, like, why seven? Why was that the number? And
yeah.
it hit me one day, I think probably after I had my own kids, that
Mm,
wow, it might be 7 generations is what we will know in our own lifetime, right? If we're fortunate
mm,
enough to know our great grandparents, any of our great grandparents, and
yeah.
we're fortunate enough to know any of our great grandchildren, that
Mm,
is a span of 7 generations. And so I think when thinking about legacy, certainly I hope my children are proud and happy about the decisions I've made through the course of their life as their dad and as an entrepreneur and a leader. But moreover, that the generations coming after them will also look to us, Karen, to you, to me, to many of the colleagues and leaders we're collaborating with in these times,
mm,
and see that we mustered some extraordinary hope and
mm,
courage and strength of will and spirit in order to do the work that needs to be done in an incredibly challenging and complex situation. And so
mm.
my hope is that many of us are remembered right now from this time we're living in, 100 years from now, 200 years from now, 1,000 years from now, as being incredibly open to the guidance and the intelligence of nature and of Mother Earth as we transformed our human reality here on the planet.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing, Aaron. Thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we can have you back in the future to see where you are in your journey and talk more about the book. And yeah, if people would like to connect with you, what are the best platforms to do so?
Oh yeah, just as I mentioned, veritasbook.com is great. VIRIDITAS book.com, yonearth.org, letter YONEARTH.org. And then we're out there in social media, Facebook, Twitter,
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, yep, and some of the other platforms as well. So yeah, look forward to connecting with you, and look forward to collaborating as we all work together to create a beautiful, healed, and sustainable world together.
Well, thank you so much, Aaron. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Karen. Yep, talk soon.
Talk soon. Bye.
Bye bye.